Imagine a world where the war on crime doesn't just happen in the streets, but also behind the scenes of power.
Tô sentindo cheiro de merda.
Cops, politicians, and militias are all playing the same game, and the ones who pay the price are the people. This story dives into betrayals, ambushes, corruption, and violence, revealing that the real enemy might be much closer than it seems. Nascimento is inside a police vehicle being transported after leaving a hospital. Suddenly, the car gets hit in an ambush. While we hear gunshots and chaos, Nascimento starts narrating in voiceover, saying he's gonna tell us how he got there 4 years earlier. Fraga is in a university classroom working as a professor. He's writing on a board while explaining to students about human rights, police violence, and public safety. The camera switches between him from behind, writing and speaking with energy, and the attentive students, some taking notes, others debating. The classroom vibe is politically and socially engaged. The film already presents Fraga as a counterpoint to Bope's violent practices. Right now, the narrative uses this scene to establish his position, a critical activist, an intellectual connected to social and student movements. Meanwhile, the editing prepares viewers for the shock of the other side of the story, the prison riot. A corrupt prison guard enters the prison carrying a bag. At first it seems like a regular delivery, but it quickly becomes clear there are firearms inside. He approaches Beirata's cell, the faction leader, and discreetly hands over the material like it was already arranged. The prisoners, led by Beirata, open the bag and start pulling out pistols and rifles with expressions of excitement and rage. Some prisoners bang on bars, others shout, and the camera alternates between anxious and expectant looks. As soon as the weapons reach the faction's hands, they quickly subdue the nearby prison guards, grab the keys, and free other accomplices from different wings. From there, the riot explodes. Gunshots echo, corridors fill with armed prisoners, and entire sections get taken over. This guard's act is the trigger. Without him, there'd be no armed riot, and the film already shows how corruption within the prison system is key to escalating violence. Bope gets called, and Nascimento coordinates the operation. Outside, dozens of nervous cops, press, helicopters. A group of prisoners takes hostages, demands to speak with authorities. Nascimento arrives with BOP, uniformed, armed, faces painted. He takes command and orders calm, but already plans invasion. The Bangu prison complex is in full riot. Professor activist Diogo Fraga tries to negotiate with prisoners to avoid carnage. Nascimento acts in suppression. He's there as a mediator, trying to negotiate with inmates to avoid a bigger confrontation. The atmosphere is already tense. There's noise from prisoners, background screams, padlocks banging. Fraga talks with prison system representatives and police officers, asking for calm and defending that the state should act within the law without excessive violence. While Fraga prepares to dialogue with prisoners, there are signs the situation is about to spiral out of control. Prisoners start getting agitated, guards' movements show nervousness. Fraga's presence reinforces the film's central contrast. On one side, his legalistic and humanitarian stance. On the other, Nascimento and Bope's hardline approach. Moments later, the riot explodes, showing that the negotiation Fraga was trying to arrange would be swallowed by violence. Captain Andre Matias, anxious and impulsive, shoots at criminals, resulting in prisoners' deaths. The massacre becomes a media scandal. The prison is in chaos. Armed prisoners, barricades, smoke. Bope enters the prison already taken by chaos. Screams echo, gunshots in the background, cornered prisoners. Nascimento, who's in command, orders caution. The goal is to control the situation without summary executions. Beirata is cornered in an isolated area of the prison. He's surrendered, unarmed, surrounded by Bope men. The tension in the air is visible. Some cops want to kill him right there. Nascimento gives the clear order. Nobody shoots. Arrest the scumbag. He knows an execution would be politically explosive, especially with the press and human rights defenders watching. Matias stares at Beirata with hatred, takes a deep breath. Nascimento reinforces the order, but Matias doesn't obey. In a quick gesture, he shoots and executes Beirata point blank in front of everyone. Silence for a second after the shot.
Matias eliminou o cara mais cascudo da história do Comando Vermelho.
Nascimento is shocked, glares at Matias. Other BOP officers also get tense. Some even approve silently, but they know it's going to cause problems. Nascimento realizes immediately the execution will have bad repercussions. The camera cuts to press and politicians already questioning police abuse. TV headlines show Fraga accusing police of abuse, population divided, Some support the action, others criticize. This episode becomes the trigger for Nascimento's exit from Bopi and his move to the security department. After Matias executes Beirada, the riot gets huge media coverage. News footage appears with reporters talking about prison violence and questioning police action. Nascimento, as Bopi commander, is placed at the center of controversy. The film shows behind-the-scenes meetings between politicians, security, and justice authorities. The atmosphere is all about interests. They need a scapegoat to calm public opinion, but also want someone who can be used politically. It's clear that Fraga, activist and professor, is being heard by the press and gaining a voice, which pressures the government even more. A congressman appears giving a TV interview. He speaks in populist tone, using impactful phrases, saying the government needs to be tougher on crime. The speech is sensationalist, exploiting people's fear and attacking human rights defenders. At the same time, the film shows how this speech is hypocritical, because behind the scenes, the congressman has connections with the very corruption in the security system. The editing intercuts TV images with other characters' reactions, showing how media amplifies this type of politician. This scene is important because it exposes the political use of violence. While Bopi and people live the war on the streets, congressmen profit with votes and power. He's promoted to a management position in the public security department. Cut to him in an office, in a suit, looking like a fish out of water. Nascimento is promoted. To society, Nascimento is seen as a hardline hero. The government, to get rid of pressure, takes Nascimento out of Bopi and puts him in a high position in the security department. He no longer commands operations directly, but gains political and strategic power. Captain Matias, who had connection with the Nascimento, is used as a scapegoat and ends up being pushed out of Bopi. Part of him embarks on corruption and violence practices with cops from other units, showing how the system co-opted someone who was once from the squad. Matias, the former Bopi partner, is punished for the Bangu massacre. He's transferred to another unit where he becomes corrupt and starts acting violently and outside the law. Represents the fall of a cop who once had ideals and discipline. Fraga gains space. Fraga appears in debates denouncing police violence and defending human rights. He becomes increasingly popular, politically rivaling the group that supports Nascimento. Rafael, Nascimento's son, approaches him as an alternative father figure. Appears in a jiu-jitsu class. He's training with other teenagers but shows little disposition and resistance, getting tired quickly. The instructor demands more effort, while Nascimento watches from outside, clearly dissatisfied with his son's performance. The scene reinforces the contrast between the father's rigid military discipline and the boy's fragility or lack of interest, highlighting the emotional distance between them. Bopi, under Nascimento's indirect command, continues entering favelas. Brutal shootout sequences, helicopter, armored vehicles, rifles, drug dealers being arrested or killed. But right after the cleanup, militias take over. Residents receiving orders from new armed bosses. Nascimento observes reports and notices the pattern. While Nascimento adapts to his new position, we see the growth of militias. Police officers, ex-cops, and agents start controlling communities. They expel drug dealers and start charging residents fees for protection, illegal cable TV, gas, transportation. This system strengthens corrupt politicians who use militias to guarantee votes. There's a scene where cops arrive at a favela to collect payoff money from dealers. The meeting happens almost naturally. Cops enter, receive bundles of money, and talk with criminals like it's routine. This scene clearly shows corruption within the police, revealing how some agents maintain agreements with trafficking in exchange for bribes instead of fighting it. They said they were protecting the people, but they were just trading one owner for another. There's a scene where a witness seeks out a journalist to reveal information about corruption schemes. The person arrives apprehensive, looks around, afraid of being followed, and, in a low tone, starts telling what they know. The journalist listens attentively, takes notes, and tries to calm the source. Soon after, they're murdered in their car in the middle of the street, after Fraga starts publicly denouncing police abuse and corruption. He meets with a congressman linked to the system, and the dialogue is tense. Congressman, linked to the system, speaks in an ironic and aggressive tone, accusing Fraga of taking advantage of the situation and wanting to appear as a hero. He says politics doesn't work with moralism, and that if Fraga keeps confronting, he'll isolate himself. Fraga responds indignantly, making clear it's not about cheap political discourse, but about confronting a criminal scheme involving police, militia, and politicians. He shows courage, but also realizes the dimension of the enemy he faces. Nascimento at home, worried about his son Rafael, now a teenager. Rafael talks about student protests and criticizes police, repeating ideas he learned from his stepfather. The scene where Rafael, Nascimento's son, gets caught with drugs at the police station is loaded with emotional tension. Rafael is taken by cops to the station after being caught with marijuana. He's nervous, cornered. Nascimento arrives furious. His anger isn't just about the bust, but the shame of seeing his son inside a police station, the same environment he knows from inside and knows how corrupt it is. The cops, who already recognize Nascimento as a powerful figure, treat Rafael with some care, but the atmosphere gets heavy. Nascimento explodes, scolds his son in front of everyone, mixes humiliation and desperation, and the scene shows how the rigid control he tries to impose at home clashes with Rafael's teenage rebellion. The tension amplifies because beyond family drama, the scene shows how even the son of the man who commands BOPE isn't immune to social chaos and drug influence. It's an important point in the film because it shows Nascimento's failure as a father. Colonel Rocha appears in the favela alongside the governor, celebrating re-election. The governor arrives at the community surrounded by security, political allies, and press, while residents are gathered to applaud. Rocha, smiling, acts as host, greets the governor, shows himself as community partner, and tries to pass the image of someone who pacified the place. The political speech is full of promises. The governor talks about security, social improvements, and victory as proof that people trust him. Residents, even under manipulation, clap. The scene mixes music, flags, and fireworks like it's a party. Behind it all, it's clear everything is staged. Rocha uses the favela to show political power, while the governor reinforces the pact with the militia. Some colonels appear on a luxury boat surrounded by young women, drinks, and loud music. The atmosphere is ostentation and fun, but their conversation reveals the political and strategic side behind the party. The colonels are relaxed, laughing and drinking. In the middle of this environment, they start discussing business. They talk about how the militia is more profitable and safer than trafficking, since it charges for services like gas, illegal cable TV, and security. They also comment on the support they receive from politicians who turn a blind eye to criminal practices in exchange for votes and money. The conversation's tone is cynical. They talk about violence, bribes, and territory control like it's something banal, almost a joke between friends. The scene contrasts the luxury and relaxation on the boat with the gravity of what they're plotting, making clear that corruption has become profitable and institutionalized business. The action starts with drug dealers arriving at the police station disguised, or during moments of police distraction, taking advantage of weak security. They invade the place quickly, showing organization and knowledge of internal routines. Some cops are inattentive or complicit, which facilitates the action. The dealers search lockers and steal rifles, pistols, and vests, carrying everything outside without much resistance. In the sequence, Beaupier receives the mission to invade the favela to recover weapons that had been diverted from the station. The operation is intense, right in the battalion's tactical style. Matias is recruited again for BOPE. Captain Matias has important scenes where he pretends to be corrupt to infiltrate and investigate the criminal scheme within police and politics.
E aí, Matias? Vai voltar pro BOPE ou não vai?
Matias presents himself as someone who understands how the system works and shows willingness to receive bribes. He talks with cops and militia members, feigning interest in participating in money diversion schemes and trafficking protection. The camera focuses on his suspicious looks and others' calculated smiles. The audience knows Matias isn't corrupt, but the characters on screen don't. Matias records conversations and observes behaviors of cops and militia members without directly involving himself in crimes. Armored vehicles and police cars advance through the community, while cops position themselves strategically. Drug dealers react strongly, and the confrontation is heavy, with gunfire through alleys. The skull-masked men climb the hill in formation, invading house by house, occupying alleys and breaking down barricades. Scared residents appear trying to protect themselves, and the operation's brutality is evident. They specifically look for the hideout of stolen weapons, showing it's not just a war on trafficking, but also an action linked to police corruption. Intense exchange of gunfire, some criminals fall. A skull cop gets grazed and another screams asking for cover. Matias keeps calm and orders advance.
Onde é que estão as armas da delegacia?
Suddenly, Roshi appears silently. armed, accompanied by militiamen. Matias tries to argue or intimidate, showing courage, but Rocha ignores and corners him.
Quem é o informante?
Procurar te aviso.
Quem é o X9?
The action is quick. Rocha shoots Matias. The camera alternates between Matias's look, surprised and desperate, and Rocha's firm hand holding the gun. The camera does close shot on the fallen body, then pulls away. Matias falls to the ground, fatally hit. Nascimento suspects about Matias's death, so he starts realizing his position in the department had nothing to do with public safety. It was all corrupt government strategy to gain votes. Nascimento observes Rafael, who shows reluctance and insecurity, unwilling to train seriously. Rafael tries to resist, uses improvised movements, but shows little technique. Nascimento applies precise techniques, but without hurting his son, showing control and discipline. The camera alternates between face close-ups. Rafael shows frustration and discomfort. Nascimento maintains serious expression, but there's concern behind the rigidity. Each movement reveals more about their relationship. The father wants to teach, but the son resists, showing fear or lack of interest in following the same paths as his father. Nascimento immobilizes Rafael on the ground with perfect technique. There's silence. Rafael breathes heavy, physically defeated, but his look shows mixture of anger and respect. Nascimento releases him, and the scene ends with a look between them. Journalists investigate militia complaints, publishing articles. One of them suffers ambush and is murdered, but he manages to talk to Fraga on the phone and tells everything he saw until one of the corrupt cops enters, and quick scenes of burned newspapers, shot cars, fear among reporters. Fraga appears speaking at the Legislative Assembly against police violence and militias. Some congressmen whisper, mock, others get irritated. Politicians directly linked to militias making deals. Nascimento, in narration, says the enemy was no longer holding a rifle, he was wearing suit and tie. The attack against Congressman Fraga and his son Rafael happens after Fraga starts publicly denouncing the militia scheme in Rio de Janeiro. They're inside a car when heavily armed criminals intercept the moving vehicle and open fire. The attack is intense, but Fraga survives and manages to protect himself. Rafael, however, is shot and taken to the hospital in critical condition. This scene is decisive because it shows how far militia members were willing to go to silence those who confronted them, besides serving as a turning point for Nascimento's personal revolt, since it directly involves his son. After Rafael is shot in the attack, Nascimento explodes with rage. He goes after one of the politicians involved with militias, confronting him directly. Nascimento invades the politician's space, corners him, and makes clear he knows who's behind the attack. He speaks in a dry and aggressive manner, using intimidation as a weapon. The politician, scared, tries to disguise and deny involvement, but the atmosphere shows Nascimento is no longer just acting as a cop, but as a father seeking revenge. Nascimento stops acting only within the rules and fully assumes a stance of direct confrontation against the powerful. Nascimento against the system. Now with political power, Nascimento starts investigating connections between police, militia, and politician. He notices the enemy is no longer the drug dealer, but the corrupt state that feeds organized crime. He discovers that police operations and public positions are being used as bargaining chips. BioP discovers connection between militia members and high-ranking politicians. Phone taps reveal councilmen and congressmen negotiating protection. Tense scenes in meetings at bars, restaurants, and offices. Nascimento puts pieces together. The problem is systemic. Fraga starts appearing as an unexpected ally. The hospital scene returns. The ambush against Nascimento is the result of him messing with people too powerful, but he wasn't alone. Nascimento survives, but understands his fight was never against the right enemy.
Agora era pessoal.
Not the drug dealer from the hill, but the politicians and corrupt system that controls violence from top to bottom. Nascimento gets enough evidence. Politicians' connections with militias, documents, testimonies. Media explodes the scandal. Governor and secretaries are hit. Images of arrests, parliamentary inquiries, protests. But deep down, some politicians keep smiling, already preparing new schemes. He participates in a parliamentary inquiry at the Legislative Assembly. With documents, wiretaps, and evidence gathered throughout the investigation, Nascimento shows how politicians were directly linked to militias, revealing the connection between public safety, corrupt police, and political power. Nascimento doesn't spare names and makes clear the problem isn't just street crime, but the state's own structure. This moment is the film's apex. when the denunciation against the system becomes public and undeniable. Nascimento presents phone taps, dossiers, and intelligence reports showing how congressmen, cops, and businessmen were together in the scheme. The militia's strategy: he explains that militia members dominated communities, charging fees, selling gas, alternative transportation, and illegal cable TV, always with political coverage. The politicians: when citing names, the camera focuses on percent congressmen's faces, some clearly uncomfortable. Nascimento shows they not only knew, but made money and got votes in exchange. He states the real enemy isn't the drug dealer from the hill, but the corrupt political and police system that feeds and protects crime. After all the war against militias and exposing the political scheme behind them, the camera shows backstage images of power, authorities, congressmen, and the political machinery. The film ends with Nascimento recognizing that although he won battles, the war against corruption is far from over. It's at this point the film makes clear Nascimento's fight is no longer against common criminals, but against something much bigger and structural. The film ends bitterly, without definitive solution, but exposing the structural problem. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to leave a like and your comment. See you in the next videos.